Hello, good morning. Today I'm privileged to introduce to you our 7th chapter of OB, Foundations of Group Behavior. We are going to look at group behavior and the characteristics of group behavior. Our learning objectives for today is to distinguish between the different types of groups, describe the punctuated equilibrium model or group development, and to show how role requirements change in different situations, to demonstrate how norms exert influence on an individual's behavior, and to show how status and size differences affect group performance. Describe how issues of cohesiveness and diversity can be integrated for group effectiveness, and finally, to contrast the strengths and weaknesses of group decision making. Defining and classifying groups. What is a group? A group is two or more individuals interacting and interdependent who have come together to achieve particular objectives. This is a very common concept. You all know what groups are, but what is important is that group means coming together, being interdependent, and having particular objectives to achieve. Otherwise, it can be a mob if it doesn't have an objective. There are two types of groups here. There's what we call the formal group and the informal group. A formal group is a designated work group defined by the organization's structure, maybe a department, example, a department, a unit, a division, and so on. That can be a formal group. An informal group is that which is neither formally structured nor organizationally determined. It just appears in response to a social need. If you always meet at the canteen during lunchtime and you share your light moments together with your friends from the different departments, that's normally informal group. Doesn't have an agenda. It's not part of the organizational setup, but it's just an informal group where you meet every lunchtime and to relax together during lunch break. There are also other types of groups, like the command group, which is composed of the individuals who report directly to a given manager. In a structure of an organization, a command group is that group who report directly to a given manager. We also have task group. These are people working together to complete a job or a task. Then we have the interest group, those working together to attain a specific objective with which each is concerned. And then we have the friendship group, those brought together because they share one or more common characteristics. So these are the various types of groups that are relevant for our discussion of organizational behavior. These groups, as you see here, most of them are within the structure of an organization, and they are relevant, and their behavior is relevant for organizational outcomes. Why do people join groups? This is a very good question. Why do people join groups? Generally speaking, people join groups for 5 or 6 reasons. We have highlighted 6 of them here. Security. You are safer, you are securer when you are in a group. So people join groups for security purpose. People also join group for status. I mean, if you are alone, you may not, your status may be low, But when you are in a group, say you are in a study group of very hardworking members, your status is defined by that group. So the status motivate you to join a group. But also for self-esteem, you feel exalted when you are in a group. You feel satisfied when you're in a group. You feel a human being when you're in a group. There's also affiliation. You need to relate with others. You need to link up with others. Groups are there to help us to affiliate, to work together, to relate together, to do things together. Number 5, people also join groups for power, because there's power in a group. You can wield more power when you're in a group. That's why sometimes there's a lot of tear gas in town, because when people come together as a group, they can cause damage. They can threaten a system. So power is also one of the reasons why people form groups. And finally, goal achievement. Some people form groups in order to achieve a goal. And indeed, in organizational setting, we have units, we have divisions, we have departments, we have faculties, we have schools, because we have a particular goal to achieve. And so we join groups, or we are put in groups, so that our faculty goals, our departmental goals, our unit goals, our course goals are achieved. That's the purpose why people join groups. Now we are moving to the stages of group development. Group development goes through 5 stages, and therefore we are looking at the 5-stage model of group development. So groups, just like any human being or any animal, goes through stages of development. There is a birth stage, and so on and so on, until you reach your end stage. The birth stage is called the forming stage. It is a stage in group development characterized by much uncertainty. You don't know where you're going. You don't know how will you develop. You don't know how to start. Like every like every new parent, everything is new. So if you are going to give birth to a group, it's very uncertain how you are going to start, how it is going to develop. So the forming stage of group development is characterized by uncertainty. Then it is followed by the storming stage. This is the stage which is characterized by intergroup conflict. So after starting off with uncertainty, you reach the second stage of intergroup conflict, because now you're beginning to think together how this group is going to materialize. But then you're pulling and pushing, because nobody knows exactly what is the nature of the new birth and how it is going to grow. So in that storming stage, there are conflicts, and eventually those conflicts will be resolved. Now, that then leads us to the third stage, called the norming stage. This is a stage which is characterized by close relationships and cohesiveness. Surely, at last, there is some kind of development coming up here. Norming stage. People now begin to make sense out of what they are developing. Relationships become closer, members become more cohesive, and then their energies are pulled together and they are moving. So the fourth stage is called the performing stage. This is a stage when the group is fully functional. Fully functional. They have gone through the birth pangs of early birth, and then They are going through those stages. Now they are at the performing stage when the group is mature, up and running. And like everything which is born, it dies. We come to the fifth stage called the adjourning stage. This is a stage for temporary groups and characterized by concern with wrapping up activities rather than with performance. Adjourning stage. These stages of group development is very characteristic of groups that are formed for a purpose, and after that purpose, it is dissolved. Just like a wedding committee. A wedding committee is a group of members who come together with the sole purpose of making sure the wedding takes place. After the wedding takes place, it is dissolved on the wedding day. And so on. There are many groups like that. They are formed for a purpose. Once that purpose is done, the group is dissolved. So that's why we talk about adjourning stage. Even there are projects of that nature. You start a project, whatever type of project, which have a deadline and an end stage. Once the project has been developed and it has achieved its purpose, it is dissolved. So having looked at those stages, we can now look at this punctuated equilibrium model, the punctuated equilibrium model. And this is for emphasis. Temporary groups go through transitions between inertia and activity. So this punctuated equilibrium model just helps us to look through the sequences through which temporary groups go through. And these groups go through the 6 stages as it is listed here. The first stage is setting up group direction at the birth stage. And then there is what we call the first phase of inertia, pulling and pushing, pulling and pushing. Yeah. Then stopping and pulling and pushing. And then we move to what we call the halfway point. The halfway point is a point of transition where you're saying, no, we have been struggling for too long. It's high time we make progress. So halfway point is a point where you decide now we must move forward. We've been pulling and pushing. We have been talking too much. We have been struggling too much. Now it is time to move on. After that, you move to the stage 4, where major changes take place. You begin to see development. You begin to move to see some output, and so on and so on. Then you move to the 5th stage, which is the second stage of inertia. Some kind of inertia comes in again, and so on and so on. And then finally, accelerated activity. This is when this group is mature enough and they can go full speed to achieve the purposes for which they are formed. This is the punctuated equilibrium model. For those who have the textbook that I have sent to you I sent to you on Moodle, you can look at chapter 9 and you look at the drawing of a punctuated equilibrium model. It's a very simplified model. So now, after looking at the development of groups and that punctuated equilibrium model, we can now look at properties of groups. Groups have many properties. We will begin with the group property number 1 called roles. Roles are a set of expected behavior patterns attributed to someone occupying a given position, social unit. The word role is a very common word. We use it every day. What is your role? What is your role as a class leader? What is your role as a student? What is your role as a son? What is your role as a daughter? This is a very common word we use. So in groups, in group behavior, roles are very, very important. What is your role in this group? What is your work? What is your responsibility? You are occupying a position within the group. What is your role? So, to roles, the other concept related to role is role identity. These are attitudes and behaviors consistent with that role. Once you are a student, once you are a class leader, once you are a son, there is what we call a role identity. Those, you are expected to behave in a particular manner. You are expected to behave in a particular manner. So that identity is what you are in that position, that role. There are people we call diplomats. Once you are a diplomat, you behave diplomatically. If you are a vagabond, we also expect you to behave like a vagabond. Every role you assume in a group has an identity. Okay, so there's also what we call role perception, which is the individual's view of how he or she is to act in a given situation. Perception, we looked at perception earlier in our earlier studies. Perception is your view of how you look at a given situation. So even in roles, in group roles, there's what we call role perception. How do you perceive your role? There are some students who misuse their role. Once they become university students, then they become lazy, then they begin to do things that they are not expected to do. I don't know whether they understand, they perceive their roles differently as when they are in secondary schools, but role perception is an important attribute of groups, and therefore you have to perceive your role clearly to perform it. Another attribute, this is role is continuous. There's also we call role expectations. Role expectations. How others believe a person should act in a given situation. This is also common to us. When you are a class leader, there is a way we expect you to behave. There are expectations that go with your role as a class leader. There are expectations that go with your role as a group leader. There are expectations that go with your role as a guild president. Every role has expectations. Every role has expectations. So these are concepts that we need to understand in group formation. There is also what we call the psychological contract. This is unwritten agreement that sets out what management expects from employee and vice versa. We normally, when you get a job, there's what we call the written agreement. They can say, today you have been offered this job of an accountant. These are your duties. Then they outline them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then 8, they can say, and any other duties that will be assigned to you from time to time. That's normally what an employment contract reads. But there is also what we call a psychological contract. It is not written. It is not written. But once you get to the point when you say, I am mature, I want to get a job, there is a contract. There's a contract that you enter into, not written. There are things you're expected to do as an employee, and the employer is also expected to do certain things. They are not written. This comes almost naturally. Okay, so these are what we call psychological contracts. So it's also important to know what a psychological contract is, even without an appointment letter. Once you say, I have come to look for a job, can you allow me to start working today? Even as you plan for me, there are things you are expected to do. And therefore, even the person who gives you a job, there are certain things that person is expected to do. That is what we call a psychological contract. Another concept is role conflict. It's important for organizational behavior. In a role, this is a situation in which an individual is confronted with divergent role expectations. So you have a role, but your role conflicts because there are so many expectations. You are an employee, but you're also a parent. You are a wife, but you're also an employee. So there are things that conflict with you. The children expect you to do something. The employer also expects you to do something. And so sometimes they conflict. If you stay at work longer to complete your assignment, you'll be conflicting with your family roles at home. So role conflicts are a common phenomena in group formation, in groups, in group behavior, and you should be aware of that. Sometimes it can be very critical that it can cause performance to go down if the conflict is very strong. But your role, your work is to make sure you minimize the conflict. So now, having looked at roles, we now move to the second property called norms. What are norms? These are acceptable standards of behavior within a group that are shared by the group's members. Norms. This is also a common concept in life. We all have norms. We all have norms. Roles sometimes are accompanied also with norms because there is no role without a norm. There are guidelines. There are guidelines that guide your role in whatever position you are. So those acceptable standards are norms. Families have norms. Offices have norms. Classrooms have norms, and so on and so on. So what are the various classes of norms? We have performance norms. You are expected to complete your class on time. You're expected to complete your assignment on time. You're expected. These are performance norms. There's also what we call appearance norms. UCU has a dress code, which is very unique. So we expect particular appearance when you show up at UCU. Whether you are an employee, whether you are a student, there are particular appearance we expect from you. So if you are dressed shabbily, if you are dressed badly, we don't expect you to enter the campus. So those are appearance norms. There's also what we call social arrangement norms. How are these? How are your groups arranged? How is these small groups arranged? How do they work together? How do they interrelate? So there are arrangement norms, like in a department or in a faculty, there are arrangement norms, how structures work together, how you cannot jump the queue. If you have an issue, you go through protocol. You don't jump the queue. Those are social arrangement norms. They're also there in families. They're also there in classrooms. They are there all over. So finally, there is also called allocation of resources norms. How are resources allocated? You don't just wake up one morning and say, I want so much money, unless the resources have been budgeted. So you can only ask for resources that are budgeted for and are within your limits. So there are so many kinds of norms within an organizational setup, and they are the same norms also in families. You can't wake up one morning and say, I want a new laptop. I want this, I want that. So sometimes you may not get it because allocation of resources is not unlimited. Now, to continue with this, there is what we call the Hawthorne studies. Somebody did an experiment. Normally in OB, we do a lot of studies because we want to prove the theories that we have vis-a-vis the practice in the field. So somebody did a study in Chicago, in a company called Western Electric. So there's one branch of that company in a place called Hawthorne in Chicago. So he did a study. Actually, the study was undertaken by Elton Mayo to find out what causes people to increase their performance, to increase their output. So the experiment was about light. There were a group of workers in a factory, and then he wanted to adjust light intensity. So like the hall is very big, so you need lighting in order to be able to work. So he decided to start reducing the amount of light in the hall until it was so dim. He was observing performance changes along the way as he was reducing the intensity of light. So what he discovered was that performance did not decrease significantly as he was reducing the amount of light, until, of course, it became so dark that people could not see what they were doing. Now, later on, he said, what is it? I thought that light intensity can influence the performance. But later on, what he discovered was that people behaved because of their group sentiments, because of their, their group mentality will keep them working even if something changes a little bit. Now, these are the conclusions. Worker behavior and sentiments were closely related. So their mindset definitely influences their behavior. It's not the light, it's not the heat, it's not the oxygen or whatever, but their sentiments and behavior are related. And also groups, the group influences were significant. So they are used to working together, everything they are doing together. So they are not easily distracted by whatever else you were trying to do, because that is their norm. They have been used to working as a group, and that group influence makes them to continue working despite the external interferences. There's also what we call group standards, which are also norms which were highly effective in establishing individual work output. And finally, it also concluded that money was not a major factor in determining worker output, than were group standards, sentiments, and norms. Group standard, sentiments, and norms. Okay? So there are things that influence performance other than the other things that you can introduce from outside. So another set of, yes, let's complete the norms. The norms, there's what we call conformity, which is adjusting one's behavior to align with the norms of the group. Conformity. We all do that all the time. When you enter a particular group, you quickly observe what others are doing and you conform. If you are a deviant, if you are an outlier in a group, you will soon be ostracized. They will sanction you. They will bring you to order. So once you join a group, you have to conform to group behavior. You have to conform to group norms. So that is an important concept in OB, conformity. And there's also this, what we call reference groups. These are important groups to which individuals belong or hope to belong, and with whose norms individuals are likely to conform. Reference groups. People sometimes want to associate with successful people. People want to associate with people they admire. People want to associate with people who like role models. So reference groups are groups to which individuals belong or hope to belong, and with whose norms they are likely to conform. If you like somebody who's your role model, you'd like to behave like a role model. If you particularly like somebody's attributes, that person becomes like your reference person. So even groups, if you see groups that are performing very well, you want to belong to that group. You want to associate with that group. That is reference groups. And finally, we have deviant work behavior. Deviant work behavior. These are antisocial actions by organizational members that intentionally violate established norms and result into negative consequences for the organization, its members, or both. This is also a very common thing in groups. There are people who are deviants. They violate the norm of the group. They are there. They are like I don't know whether they are called those dark spots, those dark spots, those black things that spoil the otherwise good group. They are there. So within a group, you might also have those with deviant behavior. They do things contrary to the group norms. They may not be many, but sometimes they can influence others. So it's important to understand deviant workplace behavior. So the third set of properties of group property is status. What is a status? A status is a socially defined position or a rank given to groups or group members by others. Okay? We have status, a status. Of course, in a formal organization, a dean is a position. So it's a status, it's a rank. The head of department is a rank, it is a status. The head of unit is a rank, is a status. The coordinator of a program is a rank or a status, and so on and so on. So there are so many levels of status, and so it is a position or rank given to groups or group members by others. Okay? Even at the organization like UCU, we have those at the level of DVC, those are at higher ranks, then those at the level deans are lower, and head of department, the hierarchy goes down, 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 down. But at the top, you have the vice chancellor, and so on and so on. So these are statuses. So we have group norms, we have status equity, and also we have culture. These are important in OB and in group behavior. There's also another group property called size. Group size is important. Size of the group is important. That's why when 1,000 people go to the streets to begin demonstrating, you have to bring tear gas very quickly because group size is very, very important. I mean, a group size can be destructive, a group size can be also good, but this is just to demonstrate what group size means. If there are 2 people demonstrating in the streets, you will ignore them. But when they become 1,000, then you have a reason to get worried. So it's important to understand group size even in organizational behavior. Now, there's a concept here called social loafing. What is this? It is a tendency for individuals to expend less effort when working collectively than when working individually. In some other disciplines, we would call this free rider. Free rider. You're in the group, but because everybody is working, you can actually hide in the group. you are hiding, you are not working as hard as others, but because we are in a group, you can hide. That is what we call social loafing here in OB. You are working, but spending less effort than your group members. And since you are hiding in the group, you can go away with it. But it is important to identify those who are social loafing. Because social loafing, for example, if you see a graph like this, if everybody was working, you'd expect the green line to be the output or performance. But because of social loafing, you'll find the performance is lower than they expected. So as a manager, you must make sure that you discover social loafing in the group and deal with it. There's another group property called composition. Composition of the group is also very important. What are the members of the group? What are the nature of the membership? So there's what we call group demography, which is the degree to which members of a group share a common characteristic, e.g. age, sex, race, educational level, length of service, and so on and so on. This group demography is important. So the distribution, are there men only? Are there women only? Are they educated? Are they not educated? Are they long service members? Are they not? So that composition is important in group behavior. That is very important. So when you are working in a group, please observe this demography. They have an impact on behavior in organizations. There's also a concept we call cohorts. These are individuals who, as part of the group, hold a common attribute. Cohorts, small groups, they hold a common attribute. They may all be good, hardworking, but they could also be lazy, disobedient group. But it's a cohort. Another property important in groups is called cohesiveness. What is cohesiveness? This is the degree to which group members are attracted to each other and are motivated to stay in the group. Cohesiveness. If you remember your science course, you know that if you put a piece of glass on water, it will stick as if water has attracted the glass and coalesced with it. Cohesiveness is that degree of group members motivated or attracted to stay together. To stay together. So what increases group cohesiveness? If the group is smaller, the group becomes stronger. So you can also encourage agreement with group goals. Once there is agreement with group goals, the group will be more cohesive. If you increase the time members spend together, the group will be cohesive. If you increase group status and admission difficulty, the group will be more cohesive. If you stimulate competition with other groups, the group will be more cohesive because they would want to win. They would want to win the others, so they will work together and cooperate and work closely together. There's also give rewards to the group, not to individuals. So if you want to reward group cohesiveness, also reward the group for performance, not individuals, and physically isolate the group. Once you put the groups in different demarcations, they will be more cohesive. It is important as a student of OB to understand this group cohesiveness because it has impact on group behavior. So now we come to what we call group tasks. Group tasks. And we'll discuss mainly decision making as a major task. So large groups facilitate the pooling of information about complex tasks. Smaller groups are better for coordinating and facilitating the implementation of complex tasks. Now, in decision making, there's what we call group decision making, but there's also what we call individual decision making. Since our topic is about group behavior, we are also concerned here about group decision making because it is very important. Most members of the organization make decisions in groups. That's why there's what we call departmental meeting. That's why there's division meeting. That's why there's faculty meeting. That's why there's Senate. That's why there's council, and so on and so on, and various committees. Those committees are meant to make decisions collectively. So, what are the strengths of group decision making? Strengths are there's more complete information because you are many. There's also increased diversity of views, it's important. There is higher quality of decision, it's more accurate, and there's increased acceptance of solution because it is collectively made. Collective decisions are made collectively. Therefore, there is increased acceptance. But there are also weaknesses of group decision making, namely, more time is consumed, slower, it increases pressure to conform, and there is domination by one or a few members, and responsibility is not clearly assigned. Some people can hide. Of course, some people can hide and say, it was the group that made the decision, and so they hide. They don't want to take responsibility. But you are familiar with this thing called group decision making. We normally do that. We do this a lot. Even in our class, if you have a group of 5 students working on an assignment, you have to make decisions together. And sometimes you do brainstorming, sometimes you do whatever you do, but you agree on what you're going to do together, and you do together, and you present your work together. If you fail, you fail together. Okay, so those are group decision making. There's also what we call, within group decision making, there is a concept we call group think, which is a phenomena in which the norm for consensus overrides the realistic appraisal of alternative causes of action. You may be coming also from the concept of cohesion. You are so together that you begin to think as a group. There's a tendency to begin to think as a group other than to think as an individual. So sometimes you fail to make clear judgment, or you can't appraise all the alternatives properly because there is a tendency to think as a group. And therefore, you are limited. The group is constraining you to think in a particular way. And therefore, your freedom to think as a member of the group is kind of limited. Groupthink is negative, but because it limits that individuality. There's also what we call group shift, which is a change in decision risk between the group's decision and the individual's decision that a member within the group would make. And it can be either towards conservatism or towards greater risk. People shift their thinking, they shift their decision. So this is also a negativity in the sense that group shift makes somebody to change his mind or to begin to pursue something which has a greater risk or something which is more conservative. Group shift. Okay, so what are the phenomena? What are the symptoms of this groupthink phenomena? One, group members rationalize any resistance to the assumptions they have made. They make their decisions and they are resisting anybody who will confront them or try to challenge them. The members apply direct pressures on those who express doubts about shared views or who question the alternative favored by the majority. Once you begin to question, did we make a correct decision? Somebody will push you down. Somebody will silence you. 3, members who have doubts or differing points of view keep silent about the misgiving. So once they push you down, once they silence you, then you don't talk. And so groupthink can end up being counterproductive because the group now, there's what we call group pressure, and it can be dictatorship of the group. So that is negative. So now we will conclude this with group decision-making techniques. You are probably also familiar with these techniques, but there are what we call interactive groups, which are typical groups in which the members interact with each other face-to-face. Interacting groups. You interact when you sit for decision-making, you interact with your members face-to-face. Then there is what we call the nominal group technique, where a group decision-making method, this is a group decision-making method in which individual members meet face-to-face to pool their judgment in a systematic but independent fashion. Nominal group technique. So when you go for a meeting to make a decision, everybody sits at his desk and the chairperson can decide, this is what we are going to make decisions on. Can you jot down your thinking about how we are going to do this? Can you jot down your decisions? Once you have jotted down, everybody has jotted down, then they can ask you, can we now bring your ideas together? And so they give each opportunity, they give opportunity to each of you, each one of you, to bring to the group what he has put on paper. That's a nominal group technique. There's this one which is very familiar to you called brainstorming. This is an idea generation process that specifically encourages any and all alternatives while withholding any criticism of those alternatives. Brainstorming. You also get together like with the nominal technique, but here, once the chairman starts the meeting, he says, now we are going to make a decision on which alternative to pursue to increase our output of a particular product. Then members begin to bring their ideas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Every idea is accepted and written down as it is without criticism until a later stage when you come back and revisit and say, now which ones here can we accept, which one here has issues, and so on. Brainstorming, you are very familiar with that concept. And there's also what we call electronic meeting, in which members interact on computers, allowing for anonymity, comments, and aggregation of votes. Electronic meeting. We may not have started this, but this is where we are going. Some countries in the West already do this a lot, but the way COVID has brought us to appreciate technology, we are soon starting to do electronic meetings. The beauty of electronic meeting is that you are giving your ideas anonymous. Nobody knows who is giving the ideas, but you're a member of the